as we quiz Pastor Curry about some Middle East issues. And Steve Curry, again, ISIS is marching towards Israel. We know that the Levant includes all of Israel, and that's what they would ultimately like to be obtaining and ruling over, and Jerusalem as a capital. How would you advise our foreign policy leaders at this point in time?
My advice as a Christian leader who was born in Jerusalem, grew up in an Arab culture, both a Muslim culture and a Christian culture, it's time to get our hands dirty. What do I mean? It's time for the world to see us Christians, and actually, if you're not a Christian listening, Westerners. It's time for the world to see the Western society stand up. Here's what I mean. There's a documentary that I saw, and I actually was so interested in it. I began to break it down. And this documentary it's called Citizen USA. What it is, it begins to show you they go to 50 plus states, and they go to the capital and they show you people who are wanting to become U.S. citizens. So this lady begins to ask in every state in America, why are you wanting to become a U.S. citizen? So I began to sort of transcribe and write notes on every single person in this an hour plus documentary. And Jan, I would say over 50% of people that she was asking who came out of the courthouse were Middle Eastern Muslim background. To even narrow it down further, I began to take more notes. The more my notes began to be summarized, I started to realize the responses they have were similar to these. America, there is freedom. America, there is good people. America, there's honesty. America, there is charity. Americans, they're sweet, loving people. And when I began to transcribe it, what they're actually saying is the fruits of the Spirit is alive in America. It's just they don't know the lingo fruits of the Spirit. And it blew my mind away. The reality of they're attracted to the Christian character message without really knowing that the message America is built on is a Christian character message. But the problem is we're allowing them to come in, and that same thing that they're attracted to, we're allowing them to change it. It's time to understand that the greatest things happen to America and the world is the message of Christianity, the ethical, moral guidelines of the Christian faith, and we need to get our hands dirty, meaning that we need to get out there, we need to protest, we need to stand up, we need to get active on Facebook, we need to get active on Twitter, we need to get active in the communities, we need to go out there, reach out to these people to remind them that Christianity is the best thing that happened to Americans. It is what made America what it is today.
Jill, we talked a little bit about the fact that so many, at least in our current leadership and the current administration, want to suggest that ISIS isn't Islam. You're a historian as well as an author and some other things, and your perspective on that, for the benefit of all of us here today. Islam in history is really an intriguing topic, and you wrote on it recently. You wrote about the Crusades and about how President Obama was so off base. That's way back in February now, ancient history.
Yeah, our article, Rewriting History.
Yeah.
I think we drew a pretty clear picture of where Islam came from, of the foundations of Islam, and ISIS is living out those foundations of Islam. The way that they approach Christians, the way they're approaching other Muslims who are not following the same dictates that they follow. This is what Islam is. It is dogmatic, it is unbending, and very often merciless. So I do not buy this lie that we are constantly being fed that Islam is this religion of peace. Are there kind and peaceful people within Islam? Yes. But if we're going back to address the roots of where this came from, you cannot erase, you cannot rewrite history. We are dealing with a religion that terrified the ancient world.
Yes, it did. It did.
And all of a sudden, we're forgetting this. We're going to erase thousands of years of history because of this. You know, 1,000, 1,500 years of history because of this? I don't believe it. And it makes me upset to constantly hear it in our newscasts that this is what we must accept as Islam.
Yeah.
No.
Your take on that?
I agree with you 100%. We have to be ready. We have to prepare ourselves to what's coming. Basically, you have these open-minded, they call them, like Jill mentioned, these are kind people that are within Islam. They're smart. They're coming to you and I, and Jill to you and I, and to Jan, and to Larry. They're saying, well, God of the Old Testament is just as brutal. He killed babies, firstborn for every person in under Pharaoh. So we as Christians have to be ready. Now, Jill, you and Jan are prepared to answer. Most aren't. And I think think we need to start to preparing these people. They'll call our God as vicious God because he allowed King Herod to get every child under 2 years of age in hunting Jesus. Why would Jesus allow all these babies to be killed? So we have to be ready to answer these questions because they are coming up with that same response, with those same challenges that you and I are bringing within their history. Of course, we have an answer. The answer is the context of the Old Testament. The context of what something was done was a lot different than what was done here. One was done in the name of a man. This one here was done through a divine appointment sent by God. There's two different things, but most Christians don't know how to answer that. And I think this is something we need to begin to answer more and more throughout time.
It's interesting that you should bring up Pharaoh because I just spoke with an atheist about this on Facebook, and that was his argument: how brutal the God of the Old Testament was to wipe out the firstborn of all the Egyptians. And I said, hold on a minute here. What happened with the firstborn of the Egyptians was judgment on Egypt for wiping out all the baby boys that happened just a few years before that.
That's right. Yeah.
Everybody forgets about that. Yeah. That Pharaoh had ordered all of those boys brutally killed.
They doomed themselves with their own hands.
There are rock solid answers, but you are right. Yeah. We've got to be ready to give them.
Yes, that's good.
I have you in studio with me, Joe Martin Rishi and Steve Curry, Pastor Steve Curry from Jerusalem. He was with us last fall, and you can learn more at holylandmissions.org. You can learn more about Olive Tree Ministries at olivetreeviews.org. I wanted to ask you a couple of things, Stephen, while we still have a few minutes left. I think the most important thing that's going on in your part of the world, and that's all of the Middle East, is tremendous things are happening for the gospel and for eternity. Amen. Muslims are coming to faith in incredible numbers. Some of them are coming through supernatural experiences, which some of the church puts down. The dreams and the visions that they're having, the healings that these Muslims are having. And yet when you start, and I've had Tom Doyle here and others to speak into it, when you start to hear that not just a dozen, but thousands are having these kinds of supernatural experiences, talk to us a little bit about the good news of the Middle East.
The good news of the Middle East. I love that. It's to a lot of people, that's an oxymoron. But yes, there is good news in the Middle East. All the craziness that's going on. Jill and I were talking briefly about this earlier. What is God doing? And I know, Jen, you brought it up. What is God doing in the Middle East? I want to tell you, ISIS, thank you for creating the largest mission field in Islam's history for us. Islam, thank you for creating an opportunity to expose the truth behind what you believe, exposing the truth behind your God, and revealing to the world that there's something a lot more decisive, something a lot more appealing, something a lot more tangible, a lot more real, a lot more physical, a lot more supernatural, and that supernatural thing is the faith of Jesus Christ, the kingdom-minded attitude. Sorry for all those that have lost their lives. Sorry for every man, woman, and child that has been beaten, stabbed, beheaded. I feel your pain. I feel what you're going through. I'm going to tell you there's a good ending. And those that have read my book, Jan, and they tell me, Pastor, we start to realize throughout your stories, and that's something I didn't even intend to do, but those that read my book, Jan, they start to realize, Pastor, in every story, there's an ending. There's a great ending. I never intended to write it this way, but they start to realize, it even taught me to go back to my own book, to begin to read the stories, to realize, wait a minute, it wasn't for that, this wouldn't happen. It wasn't for that, that would have happened. It wasn't for my Uncle George's martyrdom, Jan. Our church in Jerusalem, we wouldn't be there today. The largest evangelical church in the eastern part of Jerusalem, the only pro-Israel movement in that part of Jerusalem, Arab movement, I mean. Yes. So ISIS, I thank you for making us realize how cool and how real Christianity is and how tangible, how transparent Christianity is. They have created the largest field. So therefore, don't be afraid. Remember, you got to get your hands dirty. You got to get out there. You got to be an active voice and agent for the gospel. You should not and must not be afraid, fears from the devil. And thirdly, it is all good and it's all worth it. That was my message at the UN. It is all worth it. UN. It is all